Hello and welcome to the Low Budget Review Show. I am your host, Eric Smith, and today I am talking about The X-Files Trust No One, an anthology edited by Jonathan Maberry and published by IDW. This is the first of three anthologies, and as with most anthologies out there, it's a mixed bag of stories. There are a lot of great authors in here. Just an example, Max Allan Collins, Paul Crilly, Ray Garton, Heather Graham, Brian Keene, Tim Levin, Stephen Petruka. A lot of great people, a lot of authors I like. I've heard of most of the people that are in here. These stories range from the early days. There's one in particular that has Mulder before he was working for the FBI, wasn't working on the X-Files yet, and then all the way up to the 2000s, I'd say the time frame of the two seasons that came out recently. I guess it's been a couple or a few years since those came out, but that's, I think the one story is set around, I want to say 2007, although that is 13 years ago. But is there anybody that doesn't know what the X-Files are? Fox Mulder, Dana Scully, working on mysterious cases of shapeshifters and aliens and cannibal families and all of that crazy stuff. There's tons of government conspiracies and alien conspiracies, and just 11, 12 seasons total and 2 movies. And as I said, this collection kind of covers the gamut. And I actually tried to read this when it first came out, which was 5 years ago. And after reading the first 2 stories, I wasn't getting into it. I felt they were a little too much the same, especially the fact that something happens at the end of both of the first 2 stories that's essentially exactly the same thing. And I just kind of gave up on it. But recently, I felt like I was in the mood for it, and I flew through it pretty quickly. The thing with those first 2 stories didn't bother me this second time that I read it. I don't want to tell you what it is in case you go out and read it, but if you do read it, you'll know what I'm talking about. The stories there's some Monster of the Week stories. There are some conspiracy and alien stories. There's one is first person Dana Scully, which was a fine story, but I'm not an obsessive fan, so I could be wrong about this, but I didn't feel the author captured Dana Scully's voice. So again, the story was fine, but that was a bit of a miss for me because it just felt like it could have been anybody narrating the story. As I said, there's a story that takes place before Mulder has started working on the X-Files, and it features the Darren McGavin character. For those who don't know, Darren McGavin played Kolchak the Night Stalker, one of the greatest horror shows on TV back when I was a youngin', and I believe one of the inspirations for the X-Files. So he was brought in to play a former FBI agent who had worked on the X-Files back in the day. I want to say his name was Arthur Dale. So one of the stories, the story where Mulder isn't working the X-Files yet. He has a partner that's not Dana Scully, but he's aware of Arthur Dale. He's aware of the X-Files. We get a flashback to when Arthur Dale was working on the X-Files, and this case comes up that ties into that old case. So Mulder talks to him. They investigate the cases. Really, I like this one a lot. I like the way it plays out. I like the fact that the Darren McGavin character is in it. It doesn't have Dana Scully because she hasn't been introduced to Mulder's world yet. There's one that's kind of, for me, kind of odd for an X-Files story. without giving too much away, it does involve this this dwelling that has two windows on the same wall, and if you look out, I think if you look out the right window, you're just looking out at whatever's outside the window, and if you look out the left window, you're seeing what's outside the window, but way in the future. And the things that go on in this story, I really like the story. But for me, again, not an obsessive fan, it felt like one of the more out there X-Files stories. I'm not sure it's at all similar to anything they did on the show, which isn't a bad thing. It was just an odd thing to me. There's a couple of stories that feature Director Skinner. Again, if anybody doesn't know, Director Skinner, or actually Assistant Director Skinner, is the person that Mulder and Scully report to. He's sort of the buffer between these two agents that are searching for the truth and the conspiracy people that don't want the truth to necessarily come out. So those stories are pretty good. And it's nice to see, other characters sort of take the spotlight. One of my favorite episodes of The X-Files was one that focused on Cigarette Smoking Man. It was his story. It was very entertaining. And I'm going to make a confession. Most people I know who watched The X-Files preferred the conspiracy stuff, the ongoing stuff, to the Monster of the Week episodes. I always preferred the Monster of the Week episodes. The conspiracy stuff was fine, but to me it got very tiresome. I liked the individual episodes. I missed that the Lone Gunmen aren't in here. They were favorites of mine. I watched their spin-off show, and but there's none in here. Maybe they're in one of the other two, or both of the other two. I'll get to those eventually. And the one really nitpicky thing, Heather Graham's story was okay. I felt it was a little rushed, but as far as I know, Mulder and Scully are always referred to as Mulder and Scully, or at least 90% of the time. I mean, when they're introduced, they'll say, this is Fox Mulder, this is Dana Scully, but they always call each other, almost always at least, call each other Mulder and Scully. And in Heather Graham's story, I'd say about 90% of the time, she referred to them as Dana and Fox, and it was just off-putting for me. Again, that's very nitpicky, but it just didn't feel right, because it's Mulder and Scully. It's not Dana and Fox. That's my 2 cents on that. So anyway, I don't want to get really into any of these stories and give anything away, because it is a collection worth picking up if you're an X-Files fan. I get in trouble for this sort of thing because I'm not a mega fan of a lot of these things. I don't really nitpick. And again, I've mentioned this in some other video, my reviews of the Alien and Alien versus Predator books, the newer ones. I took some flack for not being a true fan and actually recommending the books that apparently were trash if you're a true fan. So I'm going to say, if you're a fan of the X-Files, I think you'll enjoy this. Maybe I'll get some flack for it. But yeah, there's some really good stories in here. I don't think there's any that fail. A lot of them are similar to the show, and okay, if you've watched the show, you know that there are a lot of episodes where Mulder is satisfied with the answers that he's gotten. Scully isn't satisfied with the answers that Mulder thinks they've gotten. And the government comes in and destroys evidence or hides things or does whatever. There's a lot of that going on in here. So they do, for me, they do feel like, for the most part, episodes of the show. There are going to be stories with no concrete answers. There are going to be stories that straight up have concrete answers. There are going to be stories where Mulder believes he has concrete answers, but the rest of the world's never going to know, and Scully might not agree with his assessment. Brian Keene's story was one of the Skinner ones. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, there's just the Max Allan Collins story, really good. I mean, he's an author that I love. Just good stuff. If you're an X-Files fan, and if you're a fan of any of these authors, would I recommend it? If you're not a fan of well, if you hate the X-Files, then of course I wouldn't recommend it to you. If you're neutral, if you're not familiar with the X-Files, I'm not sure how well they're going to work for someone who isn't familiar, simply because of the flavor of the stories, because of the open-endedness of some of the stories, just as the open-endedness with some of the episodes. It's a tough call on that point. I'd say if you like the authors and you want to read some interesting stories that they wrote, maybe go to the library and pick up a copy when libraries reopen. So here's what I'm going to say. If you're a fan of the X-Files, buy this book, pick it up, read it, enjoy it. If you're neutral regarding the X-Files or don't know much about it, but you like the authors, pick up a copy at the library and read it. If you don't like the X-Files, don't bother with this book. And that's all I have to say, I believe, on the X-Files. Trust No One, from IDW. IDW, if you don't know, is a comic book publisher, but they've, for quite a while now, they've been printing books. They've been making board games. They've branched out into different things. Trust No One was a catchphrase for the show. If anyone doesn't know that, I'm looking over to my other ones. The second anthology is called The Truth Is Out There, which was another catchphrase. And then I think Secret Agendas is what it looks like is the other one, which I'm not sure where that comes from, but I haven't read it, so maybe it'll be apparent. I expected I Want to Believe to be one of the titles, but apparently it's not. Anyway, the X-Files. Trust No One, edited by Jonathan Maberry. That's all I've got. If you have any comments, questions, or corrections, please leave them in the comments below. Please be polite. But I suppose if you feel like politely raking me over the coals because I'm wrong and this isn't a good X-Files book, I mean, go ahead. Just be polite about it. Please like, share, and subscribe. This has been the Low Budget Review Show. I have been Eric Smith, and until next time, read more books.